Furthest to my left, please state your name for the record.
Diane Stefani.
Michael Corman.
Scott Nelson.
John Hagee.
Natalie Jeck-Torowitz.
Jim Baumstark.
James Dolan.
Okay, we are in our public hearing. Eric, do you want to talk about the 2022 tax levy?
Yes, thank you so much. So on the screen now, we've got the same levy that was contemplated just a couple months ago. We're still showing that the ask is for 7.7% in the cap funds. However, we only think we're going to receive 5.6% once the PTEL laws are applied. You will notice that we believe that the bond and interest levy will go down, and so overall we're expecting a 4.6% increase as required by recent statute, showing the operating fund balance here, and based on the budget and the levy, this is how we anticipate to end this fiscal year, FY23, in terms of our operating fund balance. And that's all we have.
Does anyone have any questions? Okay.
Just in case is there
Do we have any?
I'm going to. Are there any audience comments? There are no audience comments in the public hearing, so then I'm going to ask for a motion and a second to adjourn the meeting.
So moved. Baumstark.
Second, Stefani.
All right, the public hearing is adjourned. We will move back to our regular meeting now. And at this point, we're going to come to our agenda, the approval of our agenda. I'd like to make a note that under the report section number 6, that is an item that will be voted on in section G2 tonight, so it's actually a duplicate, and we're removing it from the agenda before we do this. So can I ask for a motion and a second to approve the agenda?
As amended.
As amended.
So moved. Dolan.
Second, Hagee.
And I'll take a voice vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the motion carries. Now I'll ask for an approval of the November 21st, 2022 regular and executive session minutes. Can I ask? Okay. And a second?
Corman. Second.
Can I have a roll call vote, Katie?
Baumstark,
Aye.
Dolan,
Aye.
Heggie,
Aye.
Corman,
Aye.
Nelson,
Aye.
Jeck-Torowitz.
Aye.
Stefani.
Aye.
Motion carries. Now we're at the communication section of our meeting, and it's time for our superintendent comments. Dr. Deli?
Good evening. Thank you, everyone. We have some very special guests with us this evening to share with us a very important special project that has been going on. Our strategic plan lays out a vision for District 34, being a district that embraces diversity and calls out equity and inclusion in our core values, all of which are very important to us here. One of the tenets of our mission is to connect with each other, the community, and the world. So we're very explicit about that. And I think we have a wonderful, tangible example of what that looks like that you're about to learn about in a moment. Glengrove shines a light on all of these areas with the Glengrove Community Project, a way for students to share important aspects of themselves with their peers and with their teachers so that we can all see them for exactly who they are and to be more effective in our work in educating the whole child. And we have several staff members with us this evening who were a part of launching the project and who would like to share more with you. And we have, I think, 2 mics. It's important for me, at least, maybe awkward for you, but we'd really like to know who you are. So please, I don't know who all is sharing, but please just tell us your name and what you do at Glengrove. That's important to us. Thank you.
Aurora Joaquin, speech language pathologist at Glengrove.
Sylvia Gorski Duarte, family resource teacher for the district.
Caitlin Kelleher, school psychologist at Glengrove.
I'm Kate Ellison, the principal at Glengrove.
Marie Chang Pisano, interventionist associate at Glengrove.
Hi, I'm Lindsay Lurie. I'm a district multilingual instructional coach.
Hetty Helfand, English language teacher at Glengrove.
Thank you very much. You have the floor.
Thank you, everyone, for your time this evening. I'm very happy to be here with my colleagues to present on the Glengrove Community Project. And so I guess the question on everyone's mind is, how did this come about? And so, I believe it's the next slide. During the time of e-learning, we got to see windows into our students' homes, and they got to see windows into ours. And really, we were looking for that connection. And we saw a lot of ways and a lot of things that were important to our students in their everyday lives. And so it started with conversations with our colleagues that led to the question, how can we learn more about our students and what matters to them? And so the project started, and it's really a collection of resources about the traditions and celebrations of our community. It consists of interviews, pictures and videos, newsletters, some vocabulary that we've collected from our students, activities and events that we've been hosting at our school.
Our district has over 60 languages, and specifically at Glen Grove, we have 29 languages represented right now. On the pie graph, you can see highlighted our top languages, and we're honoring and celebrating all of our community members.
The map here was marked by various students and families that have visited Glen Grove for different events that have taken place there. So you can see the colored marks there represent all the different countries in which our families are, where they come from.
So as Dr. Deli said at the beginning, this is really aligning with our district strategic plan, really thinking about how we connect with our students, how our students are contributing to our learning as a community, and really embracing the diversity in this very special community that we heard about earlier. Also thinking about our staff and our educators and how we are valuing that learner voice to really support education. And our families in the community, you'll see enormous partnerships with families and community, folks in our community at GBS, at our various parent groups to really do all of the work that this project entails. So again, really elevating the parent-community partnerships. And we don't have any of our families at the table today, but it's really important to acknowledge that their voices are clear throughout this project. And then finally, a connection to our Glen Grove SIP plan, which really is just a support of the strategic plan. And this is really situated within our SEL strategies and our valuing increasingly joyful community connecting building events and our staff to student positive connections.
So this is how the project first became accessible to teachers in their classrooms to show and share with their students. As you can see, there's different places where we housed our resources and student videos so that they could see themselves as students and a viable part of our Glen Grove community. And here's the video of some of their voices from last year.
Dear from Michael, day after that we celebrate Diwali, the big festival, Onam.
My favorite holiday, Thanksgiving.
Happy holidays!
Hallelujah! Maligayang Pasko!
I celebrate Kwanzaa.
We're going to talk about the Lunar New Year this morning.
I celebrate Baba Holy and Carnival and Indian holiday.
And you guys celebrate?
Ramadan and and all stuff like that. Rwanda, we celebrate Spanish Midsummer. Happy birthday!
How does your family celebrate Ramadan?
Basically sing together and also we eat some food and people cards. It's kind of fake cookies that are on the house. And we dress up. In Children's Day, I think my parents bring me to their work and get class and snacks from the vending machine. I I looked up and came to join me. Well, in Korea, which my family is half Korean and half Filipino, we like to do something called port, which is of Korean tradition. So when a baby turns 1 year old, they get to pick through. They have this big celebration with a bunch of family and friends, and then at the end, they get to take out from a bunch of different items. And one that I picked when I was 1 year old was the stethoscope, which means I'll have good health. We also celebrate by making decorations, which are called rangoli, to welcome the god and the goddess. And you can put them in any pattern you want. We also get together by eating sweets and cooking. For example, some of the sweets are ladoos and barfis. With the dish, we don't do it a lot, but they'll see the Chicago Lake, they dye green. Friends and family get together to share something and go to midnight mass. What do you guys do home for? I get my split guns, shoot my brother, and I'm involved a lot of water. I would beat them up, something like that. I usually take a water bottle and put the hole in the cap, spray it with.
Is that feedback or
I
is
think
that?
these mics are picking up.
What do you guys do on Easter? Easter egg hunt. Yeah. Anything else? We put candy in them and then we get to
You gotta cut the mics.
with candy in them and enjoy it with our friends and family. So everyone celebrates by putting flowers in all their houses, making food, and everyone in India, they basically grow flowers a lot because every Vishu on our doorstep, we make a circle of flowers. These is special to me because it comes from our foreign country. Our ancestors used to praise their God, Allah. We usually cook food and eat and watch movies together.
Yes, and is that special?
Yeah.
Yeah, what makes it special for you, or important?
We just love doing it, and sometimes when we do it, it gives us lots of joyful thoughts.
It just matters about hey, we just spent time with family. That's all what Juneteenth is really about for us.
Year one.
So now in year 2, we have taken what was a Google slideshow, and with the help of the communications department, transformed all the information that lived in this Google slideshow to a website under Glen Grove's website. And parents and the community can click there and link to descriptions of all different kinds of holidays that we celebrate. And there's a wealth of ideas for teachers to help them build information to celebrate, the students and the cultures that exist in their classrooms. And then another piece of information that we share out, there is a newsletter that comes out monthly to the Glen Grove School, and there's highlights of the different festivals that are that are coming up, and there's usually a schedule so that people in the community and the teachers understand. Is that our signal that we have to wrap up?
No, I mean, it's
Jim's
embedded
looking
in
at your
here.
video.
Like, am I talking too much? Yes. So the newsletter is really helpful for teachers as they plan the celebrations coming up in the next month.
A special event that we had in October this year was an event honoring the Latinx celebration of Dia de los Muertos, Day of the Dead. And we had families coming to Glen Grove on a Friday night, participating in a variety of different craft activities and some book-related activities. And some families created a small altar or ofrenda to honor and remember a loved one who had passed away. And we also acknowledged other cultural traditions of remembering loved ones with a bulletin board that highlighted some of the other ways that Glen Grove families honor loved ones who have passed away. So this event was very lively, very full of joy and activity and energy, and we think about 80 people attended it. This was the first time that we had ever done something like that. And then in addition to events, we have two areas where we display cultural artifacts and cultural information at the front of the school. There's this beautiful bulletin board that is constantly changing, and then there's like a little alcove area where we display actual artifacts and different things, sometimes made by children, assembled by families, and always honoring the current festivals or holidays. This is a video of some student reactions to the recent event in October, our ofrenda or Remembering Loved Ones event.
Can you tell me a little bit about what you and your family did here at Glenview School?
We made rangolis
Which is?
in the playground. It's a flower-shaped, colorful thing for the ball.
And how did it feel to do that at Glenview?
It made me very happy and proud because the next day after we made it, everyone colored it in and enjoyed it.
You came to the Ofrenda event at Glengrove School. Can you tell us about what you did there?
What I did there was we hang out with some friends. We made an friendly, made a friend bond. I went to multiple illustrations so I could help create it. And I also ate snacks with some friends. So I went to the friend event with my dad, and we framed a picture of one of two of my best that passed away. And then we grabbed a shoebox and we started putting things that they like to eat. And there was this paper that said things like what were their names, who made their friend up, and Helena helped us do it, and it was very fun doing crafts.
And the friend that I made one time Maggie, and this class was special to me because she's the kid that carried me when I was a baby, and I remember her each night, and I loved it.
I made it a friend that then my dad helped me make it.
Who was it for, your friend?
Well, it was my mom. My mom had lots of fun making it paper.
I like Glenview because I got to make like flowers and stuff, and my mom talked with other people and told them that like my father died.
So I feel from that then I made a friend of my grandbrother. Same with my brother. It was fun because then I could see actually some of my friends, and it was fun to just walk around the lunchroom and then whenever the lunchroom could actually be like, I've never done a craft in the lunchroom before, so that's kind of cool. It was also good to like share about your loved ones and how you actually cared about them, not just like they were there and then they're gone, just to like remember them. And you can also share that with your friends, your teachers, and other people who were there at the Ofrenda event about your person, and then you can just like look at each other. So it's really fun to make.
So this is our group.
Does anybody have any questions? I just want to add that it was so cool the way this came about organically within the school and how the students are really embracing it. Thank you.
How enriching for all of our students. Thank you so much.
This, for me, this is the best part of school boarding, so thank you.
Anybody else? All right, well, thanks
Thank
again.
you, everyone.
Thanks for
Thank
spending
you
the
so
evening
much.
with us, too. Do you have any other comments, Dan? or you're good?
I would just add that, just looking at this, I wish everyone, no matter your customs that you have during the holiday season, to enjoy the holiday season with your family and friends, and if you're traveling, do so safely.
Thank you. All right, next we're moving to our audience comments section. Kathy, do we have any comments tonight? All right. Then we will go on to our consideration of resolutions consent agenda.
Yeah, sure, if you don't mind. I'd like to just say a couple of comments related to the student fees items and some questions and observations that Mrs. Jack-Torowitz brought forward that I wanted to highlight for everyone. And that is, as we take on this new approach to establishing baseline eligibility for fee waivers, that we're going to be watching this very closely, much like we did with our full-day kindergarten fee and how that rolled out. We'll be watching very closely for those who do not qualify using this benchmarking approach. And we're positioned to do several different things for those who may not qualify. The first of which, and these are in no particular order, but we will work with partner organizations like we have in the past to see what kind of subsidies might be available to help either offset or fully fund those families who are still struggling to be able to pay fees by virtue of not meeting the threshold criteria. We also stand ready to offer long-term payment plans for families if that helps meet a need that they have in terms of their cash flow. We will look at these situations on a case-by-case basis. We'll work closely with the schools to see whatever we can do to be of assistance to families that we will do that. And we will also be working with and communicating with families related to their immigration status and any reservations that they might have about filling out certain kinds of paperwork. We want them to understand why we're asking people to do this and the eligibility that's associated with it, but then more so how we can stand ready to help if that intervention is needed. So I just wanted to lay out what will be happening that people won't necessarily see happening.
Thank you, Dr. Deli. So I'm going to read the resolutions and then ask for a motion and a second. I have the 22097 personnel report, the 22098 approval of payroll warrants, 22099 approval of vendor warrants, 22100 the 2024 student transportation and building use fees, 22101 supplemental tax levy, the 22102 workman's comp RFP, and the 22103 contract service Sunbelt staffing. Can I ask for a motion and a second for approval?
So moved, Heggie. Second, Baumstark.
Katie, may I have a roll call vote?
Dolan?
Aye.
Heggie?
Aye.
Nelson?
Aye.
Jack Torowitz? Aye. Stefani? Aye. Baumstark?
Aye.
Corman?
Aye.
Motion carries. Now we'll move along to consideration of other resolutions. We have the 22104 final tax levy, which is the public hearing we held earlier, correct? Are there any questions for Eric? Can I have a motion and a second for approval?
So moved.
And Katie, may I have a roll call vote?
Dolan,
Aye.
Heggie.
Aye.
Nelson,
Aye.
Jack Torowitz.
Aye.
Cowerman,
Aye.
Baumstark.
Aye.
Motion carries. Now we have the 22-105 resolution to develop the fiscal year and authorize development of the 2024 budget.
To approve
Happens every time.
the development of the FY '24 budget. So it's just authorization to get going on that process.
Any questions? May I have a motion for, and a second for approval?
So moved, Mike Corman.
Second, Dolan.
Katie, may I have another roll call vote?
Corman,
Aye.
Heggie.
Aye.
Nelson,
Aye.
Jack Torowitz.
Aye.
Stefani,
Aye.
Baumstark,
Aye.
Dolan.
Aye.
Motion carries. Now we'll move along to our discussion section. We have number 1, the 2023-2024 school calendar. Mr. Dorkin?
Thank you. So what was shared with the board is the first read of the calendar looking ahead to the 23-24 school year. You'll notice it looks very much like this year's calendar, particularly with the lead up to the school year. Due to the volume of construction projects this summer, there's a need to build in 3 staff-only days at the beginning of the year. So we did that again in this draft calendar with the first day of school coming on Thursday, August 24th. Other highlights would be our winter break and spring break periods match Glenbrook South. We situated the Fall Institute Day very similarly to this year in September so that we can front load that valuable professional learning with staff earlier in the year. The last student day would be Friday, May 31st, and the last staff day would be Monday, June 3rd. The only other piece I would call out would be that there's still some ongoing discussion with the Teaching and Learning Department and the committee to just fine-tune some trimester dates to create a little bit better balance. So we may, by the time we come back and ask for final approval, we may be adjusting timing of the second conference date to just better align with report card timing, trimester dates, and then conferences. So that's to come. But I would be glad to entertain any questions.
So I know this year, because of construction, we have like no wiggle room in our days. We have the exact amount of days we need. We usually have a surplus to give us some wiggle room. Is that the same thing? Because we're going to have the same construction considerations? Same,
Correct.
no wiggle room kind of thing?
Yes, so just like this current year, we have 176 student days built into this and 185 staff days, and that's
Exactly what we're required
Yes.
to have. Okay, just curious. I mean, that helps that we can utilize e-learning days in case of bad weather or whatever. But just so that we all know, if there is bad weather, for this year, next year, there really can't be a snow day in the traditional sense. It really will have to rely on e-learning days, so everybody has that expectation.
Correct, yes.
Thank you.
Thanks.
How do the 5 emergency days listed on the calendar factor into the counts?
So those are over and above the 185.
Okay.
So that makes, per our contract, we have 190 total days identified, and that includes the 4 red emergency days at the end of the year. So did I say 4 days? 5 days at the end of the year.
But you're saying those would not be available because construction is going to need to use those days?
No,
I'm not
we're
sure.
required, we have to identify, in the event that something were to cause an emergency and disrupt school, we identify in advance those 5 days. That's part of the requirements both for the state in building our calendar, and it's in the current collective bargaining agreement. So,
That's like if the computer system goes down, the e-learning day will be on that day
right,
instead of on
or
the
some,
day. Right,
some other
something like
emergency
that.
on a scale that would require
Right.
interrupting school, more than just a weather day.
Just for clarity's sake, I'm trying to think ahead. We only have 3 buildings that will be under significant construction at that point, or 4?
Well,
The three intermediates
And then
and
half of the primary.
6 buildings.
6,
of
okay.
PA,
Yeah.
yeah.
Any other questions?
Were there any tough choices to make, or when you put all the constraints on, is this basically what comes out?
correct. I mean, we had quite a bit of discussion around the ideal timing for the Fall Institute Day. you know, we would love another day of professional learning, so we expect to get back to that in future years, but we really need these kind of lead-up days so teachers can prepare classrooms at the beginning of the year. So you're right, there wasn't a whole lot of substantive changes we could make to other pieces of the calendar. Once the breaks get put in place, you know, and as I said, we're still kind of looking at one minor tweak to the timing of the second conference. Other than that, a lot of it was predetermined by the parameters that we follow.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Next, we move along to a construction update.
Can I just take a minute and tee this one up? Did you have anything you wanted to lead with, Eric? No. Okay. So, you know, we've been foreshadowing for several months now the continued trend of construction expenses outpacing our capital bond proceeds from our referendum. Hopefully we've made it clear that this is really due to economic conditions, and you can pick one, but it's really a confluence of many things. You've heard supply chain, you've heard labor-related issues, uncertainty, inflation, all of which bring to bear on the challenges at hand. The board has taken what I believe to be very prudent measures along this journey with respect to bidding, rebidding with the help of our partners to help mitigate the trend. And those efforts have paid off literally, which we're pleased about, but there remain decisions that are going to need to be made with our final phases of work. We do not have many levers, so to speak, left, so there's not a lot to actually tinker with to help us control the cost, but there are a few things, and what we're going to kind of go through tonight include the cafeteria at Springman, the ATIA science labs, and the district office, all of which are being reevaluated really in two veins. One is to keep as close to our promises during the referendum as possible, while also trying to control the amount that the board may either wish to or need to go back into fund balance to capture. So we're trying to do two things with that. Even with these cost containment measures that we're going to talk about, there will still be the question of how much the board feels comfortable contributing from fund balance in addition to the $21 million that was committed during the referendum. So I wanted to provide that basic landscape before our partners sort of go through the state of things right now and the recommendations that we're bringing to you for your consideration. No decisions will be made tonight. Hopefully there'll be enough dialogue to help guide some decision making so that when we come back in January, you can help us make some firm commitments to what we do next. Thank you.
And I just want to point out that also ties up with our CFAC presentation in January, too.
Okay, so as Dr. Deli mentioned, we are going to look at the remaining phases of work.
You don't even have to use that, actually, or will people not be able to hear then if you...
Okay, we'll try and...
We just don't want the feedback, right?
So what we'll be looking at tonight are the upcoming renovations that will happen at ATIA, at Springman, and the district office. So first up is ATIA, and this is option 1, which is the recommended option. So throughout the majority of the building, we'd be looking at replacement of classroom finishes, including flooring, painting, ceilings, and lighting. We would also look at replacing finishes in the existing science labs. So similar to the typical classroom renovations, flooring, painting, ceilings, and lighting, but the spaces themselves will not be remodeled. So important to note here, that is the existing configuration that exists today. And then also as part of that, casework is existing to remain in that scenario. Also included in the scope of work for ATIA is a number of mechanical equipment replacements. Option 2 for a TIA is not recommended, and that includes the same classroom renovations throughout the building. But in this case, the science labs are a full-scale remodeling, so it would be a total reconfiguration of the science lab space. It is much more of a programmatic equivalent to what was done at Spring Middle School this past summer, so it's very similar in keeping with that. Typical storage, typical casework changes, typical finishes, and again, the same mechanical equipment replacements. So I will allow Dave to talk about costs for you.
Okay, so as we look at the couple of options here that Troy laid out, again, option 1 is based on that reduced scope, particularly in the science lab areas. Now this number here is kind of based off of a very high-level concept estimate, and that's being compared to option 2, which is essentially the scope that we went out to bid with previously, plus some additional escalation.
Can we just go back for a moment? You know, when we unpacked design features with science staff in this building, they actually preferred the first option over the second option, which wasn't fully recognized, I think, when we took our first cut at this early on. So I just wanted to add that piece too, that we're not making that part of the recommendation in a vacuum. We've actually gotten, I think, valuable feedback from staff.
Can I ask, you said this is based on a high-level concept, the 9.8 million recommended.
That's correct.
Percentage up or down, do you anticipate? I mean, I'm assuming you baked in a lot of contingency that we've already talked about.
Yeah, so I mean, we pretty much have been maintaining on all of our estimates about a 5% contingency plus 4% for escalation.
Okay, thanks.
So about $1 million.
Yeah, that's about right.
Yep.
Okay, so moving on to Springman. Option 1, and this has mostly to do with the cafeteria, so that's what we're looking at on the slide. The cafeteria is to remain in this option. So throughout the rest of the building, classroom finishes replacement, just like we talked about at ATIA, flooring, painting, ceilings, and lighting, along with a finishes refresh in the cafeteria. So layout would remain the same, but the finishes would be updated. Mechanical equipment replacements throughout the building, galvanized piping replacements throughout the building, which is similar to what you've seen at the other schools, and installation of new fire sprinklers, again, similar to what you've seen at the other buildings. Work that is not included at Springman are anything to do with corridor finishes, any finishes at the specialty classrooms like art, band, or gymnasiums, and no modifications to the existing kitchen. Option 2 on the screen is the recommended option here at Springman. So, and that consists of cafeteria remodeling. So you'll still get the same classroom finishes, replacement, flooring, ceilings, painting, lighting throughout the rest of the building. But here the cafeteria would be remodeled. In this iteration, it includes conversion of the east gym to become more seating area for the cafeteria. And I would like to add that this is still in flux. We're still working through the different stakeholders from food service and things like that to work through what the best configuration might be. So it likely won't be this specific plan. This is just the option moving forward. It includes the same mechanical equipment replacements that were talked about in option 1, the same galvanized piping replacement, and the same installation of fire sprinklers. And all of the things that were not included in option 1 are also not included here. So again, corridor finishes, specialty classrooms, and also any changes to the existing kitchen. The kitchen would remain in this option. Just the cafeteria seating area would be different.
So as we looked at these two options, So this was more of a 60% CD estimate that we went out to get pricing on, and we carried, the same contingencies, same escalation factors, but really the difference here was only about $1 million, based on the changes to the cafeteria as well as the serving areas. So that's kind of where we landed between those two options.
So the conversion of the East Gym, it would be converted to something like this, in that it's not lost indoor play space. It's just used as a cafeteria part of the day, and it can be a multi-purpose room the rest of the time, right?
That's correct. So no matter what happens with that East Gym, it would still be available as additional programmatic space.
There is a new ramp that's cut into that.
Microphone.
There is a new ramp that's cut into that area right now so that we can get full accessibility to that space. So that cuts into the room, but other than that, it'd still be intact.
So I just have the comment of, when we sort of started down this road, the Springman cafeteria was one of our rallying calls for why we need this referendum. I personally would have a really hard time supporting something that doesn't fix the cafeteria problem based on the promises that we made. That would seem like a complete bait and switch to me, but I'm just one person, but yeah.
Springman up to schools has needed to receive a lot of love. I think they deserve a lot of love because, the condition of that, you look at the two schools, the TIA and Springman, they deserve to have the update, I think, and I agree with you. Going along with community promises, it's fair. Again, I'm just one person.
No, these are good ideas. We are not touching it. We're just not totally remodeling it at the extended cost that it would put us in.
But if you look at just the physical layout differences, one of the problems is the physical layout of the cafeteria, that you can't see one end of the cafeteria from the other end of the cafeteria. I just think if we can't fix that.
We have in the works, is that fair to say?
That's correct.
Sort of an intermediary solution
between the two.
to this.
Okay.
We believe. You may recall that when we were initially conceptualizing the Springman cafeteria, the gym was actually having the floor raised and a bunch of other things happening. It's just too cost prohibitive. So that immediately put us into the mode of, okay, how can we attain some of the main objectives that we set out without having to go that distance? Your point's well taken, though, which is why the very first slide is not really something we're interested in, because it's just it's too far away from what we were originally envisioning. But this alternate is still being worked on. It still primarily utilizes the existing space, but in a way that is a little more open, and I think can help with some of those sight lines and other things that we've pointed out really from day one.
Good, thank you.
We'll still be utilizing the East Gym as part of an eating area, is that correct?
Perhaps.
Perhaps.
If I could ask a couple questions. One, in option 2, serving is in 1501, and then you have, what's the rotation look like for someone after they get served? How are they walking?
So in option 2, a student coming out of the serving area would pass through the old stage, which is currently a locker room, and then down into...
Viewpoint?
So are those steps there from the upper to the lower?
They are, yep. So there are steps and a ramp.
Oh boy, Dane. Are you sure that's structurally sound?
Yeah, so a student would pass through that area, down steps or down a ramp to what is currently the East Gym space, which would be the new seating area. which would remain at the same level that it is currently at. So as Dr. Deli mentioned, the original plan was to raise that floor up so it was all on the same level as the first floor of Springman, but that's very cost prohibitive. So this would be a more economical solution, looking at leaving that floor level down.
And student flow is going to be okay? I mean, it just feels like upper cafeteria is a small space where a lot of people are going to have to go through. And
Yeah, so what I was ultimately getting at is I was a gangly sixth grader that all of a sudden was 6 foot tall and didn't know my feet from my elbows. And if I was walking steps with a tray in my hand and books under my arm, I was definitely going to be splayed out on the lower cafeteria floor. I'm not suggesting that we have to raise it. I'm just making sure we have considered the flow of a variety of students, of a variety of sizes that are all getting into their bodies, trying to figure this thing out, and you know, 1 or 2 of them ends up splayed out, or even more, they're going to be embarrassed, and you're going to hear from parents. So you guys can work on that. I'm struggling a little with the fact that there's only $1 million in difference between the 2 scopes. It feels like it should be a bigger delta. I'm not sure which way, but my construction eye says this is more than $1 million between the 2 options. But again, I don't need a comment on that right now. My third point may have escaped me. So I think I'll just leave it there. Oh, I know what my third point was. Dr. Deli, did we have any point of view from food service staff, from administration of the building, school principal? What do they have a point of view on this as we looked at for ATIA?
Yeah, they do. And initially, there was some concern about using the gym for some of the reasons that you just mentioned, in addition to the distance actually from the kitchen. You know, all of the trays and things have to work their way back to the kitchen. You know, the transit, the foot traffic down either stairs or a ramp was a bit of a concern. They would prefer to have it all up higher if that's possible, and that kind of gets into some of this creative work that we're trying to get at.
Yeah, I guess I would only say, you know, maybe you think about moving the location of the kitchen in a way that makes sense. I don't know. I'm worried about the down movement more than I'm worried about the up movement, if that helps at all.
I'm just worried about the number of students moving. Middle schoolers have so little time to eat, and there's a lot of them, and they tend to push for the food. They tend to like go as quickly as possible to where the food is at. It's hard, you know, I don't know. You guys are the experts, but I am concerned about flow of bodies who, you know, at lunchtime have a little bit of a hard time following, you know, directions.
I do want to take this all in the concept of a whole picture of all the construction, because what we're going to be talking about is how much we want to spend in the fund balance. So what you might describe is exactly what we want to get to, but if it takes our fund balance to 0, it's a no-go. That's all I'm
I
thinking.
mean, I agree. I'm sure everybody agrees that nobody wants to take fund balance to 0. Hopefully there's a middle ground between this and 0.
When we get to the end of the presentation, we'll have a better, clearer picture.
Right. So why don't we go on to I'm sorry, were there other questions or observations about?
We avoided 0. I just wanted to
Yes.
put that. The construction committee avoided 0.
You.
Okay. Lastly, we are going to look at the district office. So option 1 that is currently on the screen is the original facility assessment scope. So for anybody that doesn't recall what that was, because it's been a little while since we've talked about it, it includes finishes replacement throughout the district office, as well as renovations to the toilet rooms, which are pretty outdated in terms of size and arrangement, and then window replacements, which if you've spent any length of time in the district office, you would know those are in pretty bad shape. But work that was not included there was any programmatic changes, no changes to office quantities or sizes or layouts. It's all the same footprint that it has right now. Correct. In that option, the maintenance area and the district storage warehouse remain unchanged. They're just as is. So option 2, which is the recommended option, is a full renovation to provide programmatic modifications for the district office. It includes some new HVAC equipment and some minor site improvements, but it also includes new envelope improvements. So these are basically all new office layouts, all new office locations, and you will notice that the district maintenance garage and the storage warehouse are now taken over by programmatic use for the district office. So what is not included in this is any consideration for the maintenance garage and district storage space. Those are displaced from the building and not currently accounted for in the budget.
So looking at these two options, again, the facilities assessment kind of base level initial budget was about $2.5 million. And then looking at option 2, again, this is a high level concept budget that's been established based on all the programmatic changes and the additional envelope improvements, taking over the spaces, everything that Troy mentioned, gets us to a total of $6.625 million, which, you know, is about a difference of $4.1 million between the two options.
And that's plus in addition to, we gotta find some maintenance garage and storage areas.
Correct.
I mean, unless we have that somewhere else. So, I mean, like, is there a working idea on how to solve that? Or?
So, John, what I'd suggested in our construction meeting was partnering with some of our other intergovernmental agencies, whether that's the Park District to use their parking facility over in West Glenview, or Road District, or Village, or, you know, or 225. You know, so I think those are all things that we would, you know, we should evaluate in an era of tight real estate. One thing I want to put into the mix here is the other benefit of not working in a school building is we don't have to do all of it at the same time. If we want to do the windows because that's a priority, we can set that up as a separate project and say we're going to do the windows, and to help with envelope and comfort and energy efficiency. So my point in that is we don't have to do all of this work in the same exact moment. We can spread this out over some period of time when we understand what our finances are. We could chunk this into smaller buckets of work as we evaluate finances, you know, years forward.
So the fundamental difference, if you didn't pick up on it, is space. So there are two challenges with the district office. One is that the building is deteriorating just with its age. The other is the space. So we have 2, sometimes 3 people working within one space. Some of those individuals, you know, at times have to make confidential phone calls or meeting with employees or parents. They need to find places to go. I don't need to give you the litany, because any of you who've been to the district office know that space is a big challenge. You know, we have about 30 females that work in the district office. We have 2 toilets. I mean, none of that gets rectified in the first option. So I only point those things out that I think there is a longer-term solution that we need to spend some time vetting. And we can take an incremental approach. That's certainly an option. We can kind of hit pause and fully investigate different options that might involve, you know, using different facilities all together to try to accomplish what we're trying to do here. I think either way we go, what we're talking about is fund balance, because there are no referendum dollars left to put into the district office. So that's kind of where we're at with it, and I think it needs some more work, probably in terms of just thinking out a strategy for it, which we're happy to do. We haven't spent a lot of time doing that. I think we wanted to make sure we had the opportunity to explain it's a condition of the facilities, but also the inadequacy of what the footprint offers us, given our contemporary needs.
Well, I mean, have we explored or even found if there's a possibility to explore the idea of leasing space for the school offices? I know other districts have done it anecdotally. I don't know if that's because of emergency situations, but it seems to me there's an abundance of commercial real estate available where we could get a favorable terms for a long-term lease.
Yeah, and good point, John. The answer to your question is we have not investigated that. I think that is the sidecar to this work. This is basically designed to help you understand what the needs are and what they would cost currently. We have some more work to do, I think, in terms of what other alternates exist without using this particular structure. And so we don't have information to share about that. I think that's work that needs to be done. And I do agree that there probably are some favorable terms that exist for us in that respect. It will not come without renovation costs. So transforming whatever vessel we can find into a functional space will have a price tag that we obviously haven't investigated either. But yeah, these are all good conversation points that we just needed to bring to light, because I think what we found out pretty quickly was that, you know, that 2.5 was not 2.5 when we hatched this the first time. It was, what was it, half that?
It was, yeah, it was a little bit less, about 1.5 or so.
Right. And so what we're even getting relative to this 2.5 even has me questioning a little bit whether or not we'd want to invest that in here without a longer-term plan. So,
well, and one of the challenges, and I've thought through the same thing, John, was if we go into another building, we're taking a building off the tax rolls because we're not going to pay property taxes. And what's the impact to other taxing bodies in that scenario? So that would just have to be something that would be added into the net present value of any deal.
Well, I think what Scott alluded to a little bit ago is how much fund balance do we want to use? We've committed fund balance to our referendum projects with the idea that that was it. We, I think, very conscientiously drew a very particular line of how far we were willing to dip into fund balance. And now the question is, how much do we want to dip more, if anything, because I'm sure Eric will very quickly remind us, easy to take away from fund balance, virtually impossible to replace it.
With our structural operating deficit, it's almost impossible to replace it.
Right.
There's a slide for that.
There is.
Can't wait.
All right. So this slide's really kind of a current snapshot of what we've got projected for our total referendum project cost. So as we look at the cost that we already know, which is which has been bid and already completed and/or in process for phases 1, 2, and 3, plus these recommended options that we've discussed this evening for ATIA, Springman, and the district office. And then we have a handful of roofing projects that are taken into consideration with an escalated value that takes us to a projected total of $171,731,646. Sorry.
And what's the delta on the promise?
$20 million.
20 million, okay.
Keep going? We good? So we'll just kind of talk through a little bit of the scheduling components here as we look at ATIA. So the way that we have this currently structured is that the work will take place over 2 phases in summer of 2024 as well as summer of 2025. So the plan would be in January to have this discussion again. Once FGM gets a green light to move forward on final design, we would then look to go out to bid in July. And And that would lead us into that summer of 2024 for Phase 1, and then Phase 2 in 2025.
And this,
Dave, sorry. Dave?
Yes.
We, in an earlier iteration of our project, we tried to get our stuff into the queue earlier. But now we're back to July.
So part of, I mean, it's really a little bit more design related as far as getting it out to bid at this point, because ITIA is going back to a little bit of a redesign.
So you're blaming the architect?
I would never do that.
Can we just all work to try and pull these dates back to try to take advantage of being early in the market is my point.
I mean, July is quite early considering this is 2024 work. I mean, most of the time we bid in September through February, but I mean.
I know, but I get it, Dave, but we went through a whole exercise here a year ago where you guys came to us and said, we want to push part of the work out to be front of the line at a date certain.
Yeah.
And now you're saying it's not that important.
Well, it's not even that. It's also another consideration. Another consideration is that, you know, if we go too far out, then we're asking contractors to project out a lot further in advance. So by giving them a couple more months, you know, that kind of helps ease some of the potential fears for the escalation and whatever else between that, you know, 2-3 months. But,
okay.
You know, that's kind of what we've been looking at.
But it's kind of a roll of the dice, because waiting a few months might mean a higher escalation. Right. I mean, we just never know, to be honest, right?
We don't. I mean, it could be done, but that's a function of, I mean, we can discuss it.
So here's the Springman schedule here.
Springman, again, we're looking at working through design in January through June to go out to bid in July, similar to ATIA, and all that remaining work would look to be completed in the summer of 2024. The district office is going to follow on the same timeline with Springman as of right now, pending any additional conversations that may be had about other options. But initially, we discussed design approval in January, for out to bid in July, and construction in summer of 2024.
And then this final slide is a draft version of what CFAC will be presenting. This is a 10-year look. It's a 5-year history and a 5-year projection. And if I can focus your attention to the black line moving from FY23 to 28, that is the recommended path that was just presented. You'll see 3 separate years of fund balance contribution, and that would land potentially the district in 26 at this 31% operating fund balance, which pretty much stays level for the next 3 years. So each of those recommended paths is what gets you to the black line.
That's what I was alluding to. I jumped ahead in the slides.
So if I'm just trying to think like a rule of thumb here, that 21 million creates a difference between that 52% line and, I'm looking out at FY28. It's like about every million's 1% of fund balance. Is that a good, just a mental rule of thumb to think of?
Yeah.
I will point out this is a 5-year projection. It's also based on our operating budget, which is something we do control.
I mean, to an extent, I mean,
I know.
you know, I mean, yeah.
There's other options available.
And obviously, every iteration will change this. We just wanted to show you the recommended path and then what the outcome would look like.
You know, what I find really interesting in this total cost, you know, that we're looking at today, and again, it's still a projection. You know, when we started this, even before we went to our community, you know, we put up a substantial amount of money to get 85% drawing so we could have a more accurate picture of where we were, and the assumption was that that final number was going to be within 10% of what we projected it to be. Now, in between now and then, so, you know, if you consider 10% to be the normal fluctuations that happen in any kind of construction project, timing and weather, all such things. And then you put in that we had a global event, and commodity prices that you would have been laughed out of the room if you predicted that back then. We're still only 13-14% outside of that initial target, which is I think kind of impressive in a way. It's not good news. Like, hey, we're not losing as much as we could, but it could sure be better. But I think that's of note.
And within the system, we captured that much value by issuing the debt early. It's just that we can't use it to help pay for this.
Right.
Yeah, our promise to the community on our costs is saved the community $37 million in 3 years of debt payments. So we're doing a great job by the taxpayer. Now we got to do a good job for the students.
I don't know, perhaps I can just weigh in. It seems like a TIA doesn't require a tremendous amount of creativity. It seems like, all right, you had option A, you kind of like your current option, we can work with that, we can make some modifications. Just in looking at and listening, it sounds like there's a lot more work to be done to actually align on what a final plan for Springman even looks like. So this is effectively an illustrative starting point, but it's almost like a centering that we're gonna have to continue to refine to actually understand what that actually even means in terms of, like, is it $1 million difference? Is it a $4 million difference? And similarly, and Dr. Deli, you made some comments. I think we need to probably be a little bit more creative about what we do with the administration office and how we think about what a difference $4 or $5 million means for different services and where they can be applied, especially because we're now talking about general fund dollars as opposed to things that we've kind of taken advantage of in terms of bond issues, et cetera. So this is helpful to start, but I think what it raises are more questions than answers at this point for at least 2/3 of the conversation.
So yeah, these are all good thoughts. What I do want to remind the board in January is we are going to have to come back and give them some sort of idea of which way we want them to go. So over the holidays, think about where we're at, and maybe you guys can come back with some more information for us, Dr. Deli, especially in relation to possible options for a district office and a little more clarity to Springman.
Yeah.
If I could add one thing, and I've already expressed my support for the renovation of the district office to the committee, and I'll reiterate that support. An important part of being a destination district, a district that wants to recruit great talent, frankly, is office space. And right now, we don't meet that mark. I know that may not seem to be, it's not the academic focus necessarily, but I certainly am sympathetic as the only man living in a house with 2 women. The bathroom situation is not tenable, in my opinion. That's something that needs to be remedied, post haste. So I think it's valuable to think about the district headquarters building more holistically in terms of what it looks like to recruit future superintendents, assistant superintendents, leaders of our district. We want to be a destination. That's something that we've all talked about around this table. I know it's going to be a very difficult lift, but I am broadly supportive of the administration's recommendations. I do not like the fact that we have paper records in our warehouse. I think we have to solve that problem. Dr. Deli knows that I've talked about that since before I was on this board. We have to find better uses of that space. But I would encourage our partners to look at, in looking at the drawings, if I'm not an architect, and the architects know that, if we're thinking about windows, it's one thing to put a new window into an existing hole versus cutting in a new window in a different location. I just hope that we're thinking through the permutations of what it looks like to renovate that building in such a way that we are being cost effective and not necessarily taking a white, a magic an eraser to it and saying this is what we are going to make it. Maybe the lighting won't be exactly right. We can solve lighting, but let's just be really thoughtful about how we're going to come to this table with the precious resources that we have available to use for this district. Thank you.
Any other discussion?
I guess as I'm thinking through this at a high level too, it's like the fundamental question is going to be how much of the fund balance do we want to spend? So I almost wonder if we should go from the other direction, like what would the implications be if we just said, no, we have to spend 150? I mean, it might be a terrible outcome, but like at least understand what that means. If we say, no, got to hold to 150, and you might say, well, that's going to mean, you know, open windows and roofs that aren't complete, or whatever that means. So we understand the implications, and maybe we think about it in $10 million increments. If we were willing to spend 10 extra million, what would that mean? What would be the use of that? Then 20, which is maybe this recommendation, and maybe even 30, just to understand, like if we were willing to go an extra 30 to 180. And then at least we'd understand the implications. And then I don't know how we get at this, but like, I'm trying to like wrap my head around how would I feel about 31% other than just feeling generally uncomfortable. But like, I don't know, do we talk to a rating agency? Like, what does it mean to be at 30% fund balance? Like,
There is an answer to that.
And I would wait for CFAC to present that to the board in January. That's
Well,
what
could
they'll
we-
come.
Yeah, we could also, we could also have a conversation about, you know, a recovery plan for the fund balance too. Now that gets more at.
One thing.
That's a different option.
That's a different option,
operate-
yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
One thing to remember is Cook County is late with their tax bill cycle right now, right? I'm not sure when all the money's going to come in. I think it's a safe bet to say it's a 4-month delay, and that's a 33% fund balance, you know, percentage that you need just to bridge that
So
gap.
is our fund balance at 40 now because we haven't gotten tax bills?
Yeah, we're obviously very short, and we anticipate that money starting to come in, but.
But I mean, that would be good to know, like, if we just need to be able to absorb 40% fluctuation because of taxing authority being
Yeah.
4 months late.
Yeah, I mean, Cook County went against statute for many, many years and got on track about 13 years ago. This is the first time since then that they're having a challenge, but this is a big challenge for your property tax dollars and your revenue. So that's the one main point I'd make when it comes to fund balances. If you don't have 33, 40%, you're looking at short-term anticipation warrants just to make payroll and AP. That's the difference. It's not that you couldn't, it's just, it means something different.
But I also do want to point out that this is 4 years out. And we've been projecting this for the last 5 years, 4 years out. So I'm not saying it's not going to happen. I just want to make sure, Jim, that you know right now we're fine.
Or I'd want to, or maybe, I guess there's a chance that 5 years of operating surpluses would just about add up to 20 million if we.
Yeah, we haven't
That can
had
happen.
Yeah.
I mean, that's been happening.
A little,
Yes.
yeah.
Generally speaking, Eric, going further in the red jeopardizes our AAA rating, correct?
I don't think so.
Yes, however, it's going to be some time before we.
We can't issue new debt.
19 years.
19 years.
Right, I know, we're not thinking,
Yes.
can't issue debt for a long,
But
long time.
to your
but-
point, our ISB financial profile rating will go down. I mean, there will be some implications as to the impact of that fund balance.
I liked Jim's approach. I actually, because I would also like to know and, have us think very creatively, what will it mean if we're, in these increments? What does that mean? So we can understand, what is it that we can't do? I just think it would give us a better way to make a decision. 'Cause we have some tough decisions ahead.
Yes, we do. But that's what we're here for.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, are you interested in knowing savings by not doing anything, I guess would be my question. We haven't presented that. I just think I need to ask it because.
Well, I mean, I think we know the savings, it would be.
About 20 million.
Spending all that money.
Well, I mean, like, or one portion of it. I don't mean across the board. If we said, okay, the ATIA labs stay the same, so we know what we would not be spending by doing that. So you can excise certain portions of this, and we can.
I think we do need to know that, actually, because I think we're gonna get into situations where we have to weigh one thing against the other, unfortunately. So we have to have some reference point to know how to prioritize this. Because
Right.
I'm not sure we're gonna be able to commit to all of our priorities. We might have differing priorities, and we're gonna have to come together and figure out, as a group, how to prioritize this.
Unless there's other creative solutions that we just don't know about yet.
Well, I mean, we've exhausted a lot of that. I mean, we're going back to Springman Cafeteria, like I mentioned, but like, I think ATIA is a good example of, there's the option of doing nothing or replacing finishes as Troy described. I mean, I don't know that there's a third.
I think that the option that the administration has put forward gets us as close as we can to the promise that we made while keeping our fund balance at projected years close to or above 30% based on the projections. That black line includes all of the options you've already presented tonight, correct?
Yes.
So while it's not ideal, it's a starting point for us to consider.
Right, but this need to flush out, what does it mean to operate a school at 30 for a couple of years? Like, is it just mean you have to have a line of credit available because of short-term fluctuations?
Yeah, I don't think that's available to us.
Well, he said short-term warrants.
That way.
He's not making
Yeah,
it
short-term warrants, yeah.
Sorry, that's line of credit in quotes.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And I will point out that it's also 4 years out. And there's time in between those 4 years for the board to do other things in many other ways.
I'm having a hard time feeling comforted by that at the moment. You would hope and you'd wish. We also hoped and wished that inflation wouldn't go up.
Well, so you got something to think about over the holidays.
Thanks, Scott.
You're welcome.
So we'll come back again with a little bit more information as well before you help us directionally with our next step. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move along to our board policy review, press issue 110, first read.
Yeah, there are quite a few, as you can see. We did pull a few of them just to get some legal guidance on a few of them in terms of some of the suggested changes and implications for that. So you'll see those either in between this review and the next, or we'll just push it to the next if time permits. But we go through our normal process of reviewing these, which is, as the policies come in, they're really divided by department. That's where the first review comes up. Sometimes they're shared between departments, particularly if there's any kind of overlapping impact of the policies. Some are given to our legal counsel to review, others not. It just sort of depends. So this is the first read of this press issue.
Does anybody have any quick questions on the stuff that's already in the report? We are clarifying that one section about partners, right? With the
Board member conflict of interest is one that's being
yeah.
reviewed.
It's got some sort of new changes to it that we want to get some clarification on. All right, we'll talk about that again, right?
So the modifications that are in there now are just the press modifications. They haven't been potentially modified in addition from our legal review or anything, right? This is
Correct.
just straight up press.
Correct.
Well, there have been some minor adjustments for reporting people's names.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
Substantively, though, anything that we would like to add in terms of addition, we have to work through our legal counsel on. But yeah, thanks for that, Mike. You actually pointed out some things that were incorrect that needed to be right-sized.
I mean, I went through most of the press documents where, reference numbers and stuff like that, different court cases they reference. There wasn't that any different substantial changes.
It's a little bit shocking how many laws change in
Yeah.
a given year. If you read that, and the court cases.
The court
it's just-
cases was
it's
amazing,
shocking.
yeah.
Courts are back open.
Yeah. All right, so we will talk about that again. Now we'll move along to audience comments. Kathy, do we have any audience comments right now? All right, I will move along to the report section. We have the number 1 FOIA report, the number 2 Phase 2 and 3 construction change order report, number 3 referendum expense report, the number 4 monthly budget report, the number 5 current financial projections, number 6 is stricken. We already chose that in the agenda. Number 7 is the following meeting agenda. Does anyone have any questions on the reports? Is there any other business? Can I ask for a second, a motion and a second to adjourn the meeting?
So moved, Mike Corman.
Second, Hagging.
We're adjourned.